It's season 7 of Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. We hit the 300 episode milestone this year, so don't forget to subscribe or follow us. We have a lot more to talk about. This week, we're continuing our trend of first-time guests in 2025 as we welcome Dave Esslinger from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and he's going to talk with us about partnering with CVBs and convention centers. It's Monday, October 20th, 2025. Welcome to episode 303. This episode is supported by USAE News, the weekly community newspaper of Association CVBs and hotels. Learn more about USAE News at usaenews.com. Hey everybody, it's Monday, October 20th. Can you believe it? It's almost the end of October. What happened to 2025? I don't know, but we're going to take your mind off time going so quickly with our guest this week, another first-time guest. It's Dave Esslinger from the Gatlinburg CVB, and we're going to dive into all the cool things about Gatlinburg. But before we do that, welcome to this week's edition of Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. I'm also the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Gentle reminder, if you haven't followed us yet or subscribed on your favorite service, please take a moment and do that because we're having so many wonderful conversations. We've broken the 300 episode barrier and we have a lot more to talk about, so you don't want to miss it. To our global audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. And thanks again for joining us this week. As I said, we're continuing our trend of first-time guests. We were connected with Dave Esslinger by USAE News, who is the supporter of this episode. So thank you, USAE. So Dave, welcome to the podcast. As I said, your first-time guest. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and very excited to be on your podcast. Like I mentioned to you before, I've had a chance to watch your other podcast. Very impressive. I think you do a fantastic job. So let me go ahead and get that out of the way first. But I'm Dave Esslinger. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Gatlinburg Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as the Gatlinburg Chamber, and then also the Gatlinburg Convention Center as well. Basically, me and my staff, our main objective, Gatlinburg is already a very large tourist destination. So we have no problem with people coming to Gatlinburg to do a lot of vacations and weekend stays and so forth. The main objective that me and my staff have is to go ahead and get non-tourists to go ahead and come to Gatlinburg. So basically, our job is to fill up the hotels and convention centers hopefully during the week when tourism isn't as high with various conventions, whether it be, religious conventions are our biggest market here in Gatlinburg, but we also do a lot of corporate and associations as well too. So our main objective is to go ahead and get people to come to Gatlinburg in a non-tourism, but we also are very big on promoting leisure travel that exists today. So, a lot of people don't have the time to take vacations in the traditional sense. So they'll go combine them with a work trip, and Gatlinburg is perfect for that. So it isn't uncommon for us to have a convention here during the week, but then a lot of the attendees will have their family members join them towards the end of the conference to go ahead and stay an extra 2 or 3 days. So that's basically what myself and my staff are looking to do is to go ahead and get non-tourist tourism to Gatlinburg, but also it kind of still bleeds over into tourism though anyways.
Well, that is first of all, thank you for the kind comments on the podcast. I really appreciate that. But that is a very interesting point you're making. We seem like we have less time, even though technology told us we would have more time. But that's a thing. We have to combine things, or maybe we can't go as far. Right now, as we are doing this podcast, the government is still shut down. That's starting to have an impact on air travel. So maybe people want to drive places or take the train. So we're looking at some shifts in that kind of travel as well. But before we kind of dive into some of the unique aspects of your role in Gatlinburg, you had mentioned as we were preparing for the episode that there's an interesting story about how Gatlinburg got its name. So could you share that with the audience?
So originally Gatlinburg was named, for the life of me, I'm trying to remember the name. I think it was River Falls, and that was what Gatlinburg originally started out as. And so many, many, many years ago, there was an individual here named Tom Gatlin. And Tom Gatlin kind of own the most in Gatlinburg at that time. But unfortunately, nobody liked Tom Gatlin. Nobody liked him and really wanted him to leave the town. He was considered a disruption. He oversaw the post office and he kind of ruled the post office with an iron fist. So they went ahead and approached him and said, "We will make you a deal. If you leave and go away and not come back, we will name the town, we will rename the town Gatlinburg after you, Tom Gatlin." And that's how Gatlinburg got its name. It was a citizen they didn't particularly care for, and they enticed him to leave by renaming the city after him.
That is fascinating. I don't
Yeah.
understand why somebody would leave if you named the town after him.
Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, how many of us have names, have towns and cities named after them? So it's not a bad offer, you know. So I mean, and, and I'm sure at the time he still had plenty of holdings, but yeah, he just had to leave because nobody liked him, and he got a city named after him. So it worked out pretty good.
It's hysterical. I should try that. You know how when you have relatives come over, I'll name the living room in your honor if you
There you
don't.
go. If you shorten your, I will rename the family room after you. Yes.
That's a good tactic. So, folks, write that down. The holidays are coming. Your relatives are going to come visit. But one of the great things about Tennessee is that it's known as the volunteer state. And 501c organizations rely very heavily on volunteers. So I think this is a great state for people to consider visiting. There's a lot to do there. I know a lot of meetings happen in Nashville and Memphis, but Gatlinburg is a jewel of a city, maybe kind of in between those two cities. Maybe my geography's off, but Gatlinburg has a lot to offer. So what are some of the other things people can do in Gatlinburg?
So first off, where Gatlinburg is located, we're at the eastern part of Tennessee, and we are right at the base of the Great Smoky Mountain Park. I could literally walk out of my office right here, and I can walk down to the parkway, the main parkway, and I can be in the Great Smoky National Park within a 5-minute walk. That's how close we are. So we're located there, and to give people an idea too, we're right on the border of where Tennessee meets North Carolina. So that's where I say we're on the eastern part. So we have the Great Smoky Mountain National Park right there, and a lot of people will go ahead and incorporate that as part of their activities when they're in Gatlinburg. Hiking, trails, fishing, whitewater rafting, all kinds of things that can be done throughout the national park and surrounding areas. The other thing that we have, and you had talked about the volunteer state. So a lot of our groups that will come to Gatlinburg will go ahead and, especially if they're out of state, especially out of state associations, will inquire and ask us as a CVB, hey, what kind of volunteer activity can we do when we're there? So we actually keep a list that people can go ahead and attendees can go ahead and do our entire group. So it's not uncommon for us to get asked, and that's why we always have a list ready to go of different volunteer opportunities that a group can do while they're in Gatlinburg, and then even to the surrounding cities like Pigeon Forge and Sevierville. There's even opportunities out there. But no, that is a question we get asked quite a bit because we are the volunteer state.
Yes. Well, and I know a lot of associations, when they come to a city for their conference or conventions, they do want to give back to the city for hosting them. So having that list of volunteer activities in the volunteer state is a great thing to do. So we were talking earlier as we were preparing for the episode about Pigeon Forge. Now, some people, it might sound familiar. Pigeon Forge is a real place, and that also is the home of Dollywood, which is the big amusement park. And maybe amusement park's not the best phrase, but it's another opportunity to go out and have some fun and learn more about Gatlinburg.
Oh, and there's no doubt. I mean, Pigeon Forge is a state of the art. It is a very good amusement park. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize Pigeon Forge and Dollywood in particular is about a 10-minute drive where I'm located right now in Gatlinburg. We work very well with Pigeon Forge and Dollywood in particular. So, us and the two surrounding cities, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, and ironically, Dollywood grew up in Sevierville, but she put her amusement park, Dollywood, in Pigeon Forge. But we work very closely with those groups. And I mean, even to the point that if we have a group that is interested in coming to Gatlinburg and our convention center is full, we'll refer to them to Pigeon Forge or Surrealville and vice versa. So there's a lot of times too, if someone is interested, if a group is interested in doing an outing in Pigeon Forge and Pigeon Forge is full, they'll go ahead and refer them to us. So we've got a very good working relationship with the other two cities.
That is great because they're so close. 15 minutes is not a long drive anywhere.
No.
So I think that's great. So that's more opportunities for people to enjoy the surrounding area of Gatlinburg after going to a conference or maybe during the conference, because I know some of us sneak out when we're supposed and have fun when we're supposed to be at the conference. But in all seriousness, you were talking earlier about how you have somewhat of a unique role in that your CVB actually also manages the convention center, which is not a typical relationship in most cities, correct?
Correct. So one advantage that we have as a CVB and me and myself in particular is that we not only convention center, but we also manage the convention center. So it allows us to go ahead and tie in a lot of the groups. So like, it's very common for when my salespeople who are with the CVB are selling the convention center. If we're talking to a group that's looking for a reduction in price, or is looking for something to be added as far as the services that we provide at the convention center, where a lot of cities have the CVB and convention center completely two different entities. I don't have to go ahead, another entity, we can go ahead and grant that right there. So it allows us to go ahead and cut through a lot of the red tape that CVs and convention centers unfortunately have with each other because they're managed and they're supervised by two different entities. With us being CVB and the convention center allows us to go ahead and grant any special requests, whether it be discounted on pricing or availability on date if we need to move stuff around, a little bit more flexibility than most CVBs do.
Wow, that is really a nice value add, I think, for any organization looking to bring their meeting to Gatlinburg because you don't have to negotiate with two or three different entities. So that's a real plus.
And the nice thing about it is always encourage when you're talking to, in our case, a CVB and convention center, which is kind of the same thing, as a prospect to go ahead and give us as much information as possible. I think too many times we're told to kind of hold stuff close to our chest because we may lose our negotiating power, but that's really the exact opposite when it comes to a convention center. And I can even speak for hotels like this as well. And what I mean by that is I encourage meeting planners when they're talking to CB convention centers, tell them what your F&B spend is, not necessarily just for catering, but also for concessions. And because that way, if we have a group that's like, your price range is a little bit out of a little bit higher than what we wanted to pay, can we go ahead and do a discount on that rent? I can hear that what they've done in the past with the conference as far as food and beverage concession sales, we take that into account. And then obviously too, because we are a CVB, first and foremost, we represent the entire city of Gatlinburg. And this is where I was talking about the advantage with the convention center. If this is a group that fill up hotel room and go to our attractions and go to our restaurants and spend a lot of time in Gatlinburg, there's a lot of things I can do with the convention center to go ahead and make it very economical on the convention center side because we are TVB. Main focus is to serve the entire community of Gatlinburg. So where we sell the convention center is a secondary item. If it is a good economic impact for the city, then we can go ahead and be um, very aggressive on the discounts we can offer the convention center because in the grand scheme of things, we want the business here, but we're not so much worried about convention center revenue as we are for the economic impact for the entire community.
You mentioned that when people are negotiating, they can negotiate directly with you for the convention center. But you had mentioned as we were prepping for this episode that there's some things people need to know about negotiating contracts with convention centers that are a little bit different than negotiating with a hotel. So could you explain that and give some examples?
Sure, there's a couple things to consider. With a convention center, most convention centers are owned by whether it be a city, state, or a county. So we don't have as much leeway to go ahead and eliminate things from a lease agreement that like a hotel or more of a private sector ownership can do. So it's a little bit difficult. And, and I've dealt with meeting planners and talked to meeting planners where they're like, well, if you really want our business, then you'll go ahead and take this or this or this out of the contract. Well, I would love to, but a lot of times because the convention center is owned by the city of Gatlinburg, well, the city has its own attorney, and the city doesn't look at it as like a salesperson like I do, where I want the business. The attorney is less likely to go ahead and be as will allow things to be removed out of the contract. So that's why a lot of times where it may look like we're being unreasonable on the stuff that we won't remove the contract, in those cases, we have our hands tied because it is a city-owned facility. At least that's in our case. But I also encourage people that when they're talking to convention centers in particular, ask what the hidden costs are going to be as far as doing the program at a convention center. A good example of this is convention centers will always require insurance to go ahead and do the event. And this is a surprise if a meeting planner has been doing their events in hotels. Hotels typically do not ask for insurance on the event. A convention center does. So there's an additional expense with that. There's things in a convention center that will go ahead and take place that will incur additional charges. There might be parking charges, there might be room setup charges. And when I say room setup charges, it's usually for turnovers. So if you've got, in part of your agreement, you have the room set up initially, however you need it. So a good example is if you've got a meeting room and you've got it set up for rounds for a banquet, but you've informed the convention center the very next day, we need that room turned over from being set up in rounds for a banquet to set up in classroom style. A convention center will go ahead and charge those type of fees, once again being a hidden cost. So I always encourage people to ask a convention center, what are the costs we incur that we don't see in your proposal or don't make it on the contract because we're going to be charged for it at the end of the event. So I always tell meeting planners, keep that in mind to see what are the hidden costs. So that way it's not a surprise and you can budget for it accordingly.
Wow, and being somebody who is not a meeting planner, I did not know that. I thought that was all included in the contract, all the turnovers and room changes. That's a really helpful piece of information.
Yeah, and that's typical in the industry where a convention center will go ahead and charge for stuff like that. Luckily, it doesn't happen too often, but there are times where a group does need those turnovers, especially if they're in a space where they're trying to utilize as much space because it's just a tight fit. Luckily, a lot of times, if you've got a good-sized convention center, unfortunately, we do here in Gatlinburg, where you'll have the room set up in rounds, and then the next day they need a room set up in classroom. Well, it might be next door, and it might be already set up, and then that way there are not those room turnovers that you have to worry about. So those are the things that you kind of take in consideration when dealing with a convention center that is a little bit different from a hotel. A hotel will go ahead and do a lot of room turnovers and not necessarily charge for it, but most convention centers will go ahead and charge for it. Another thing that people don't realize as far as a hidden cost when it comes to convention center is there's usually a charge for tables if the tables are used in a revenue making manner. And what I mean by that is if you're using a table as a round to sit and eat lunch while you're seeing a presentation, there's no charge for that. But if the group has asked for tables of the convention center, we need 150 tables because we're going to have tabletop exhibitors and we're charging tabletop exhibitors X amount per day to exhibit at our show. Well, the convention center kind of looks at it as, okay, well, if you're making money charging the exhibitors, then we're going to charge you for the table that you are needing to make money on. So that's also a hidden cost that if you require like 150 tables that are not used in the traditional sense, and in this case, for tabletop exhibitors, most likely a convention center will charge you anywhere from $10 to $25 per table per day. So that is something that I always ask meeting planners to make sure you have that clear with the convention center because that's not something that'll be in the contract. That's something that the group will get invoiced at the end of the event, but at least that way, if they know going in, they can go ahead and budget accordingly.
So they could be a surprise cost.
Correct.
Wow. Okay, that thank you for that insider tip, Dave, because
So,
I
and
know I would
that's why I
not.
said that's why there's nothing worse, and we don't like it on our end too. We don't like it to where a customer is like, "Oh man, I didn't know we had all these charges." Okay, well, we didn't budget for this. So, I've always encouraged my staff, let's make sure we be very upfront with the charges, and let's even try to ask them, "Hey, you mentioned exhibitors. So, tell me about your exhibitors. What are you looking to do?" "Oh, well, we have 75 tabletop exhibitors." "Okay, are you bringing your own tables?" "No, we were hoping to getting them from you." "Okay, well, we will charge you for those tables because they're going to be used for exhibits." Now, like I said, the tables that are used for classroom setting or rounds for banquet, no. Convention center is not going to charge for those tables, but it's only tables that are used in a revenue making manner.
Wow. That is, I never knew that. And I have worked in several associations over the years, but again, not a meeting planner. So I had no idea those were extra cost.
Now, but like I said before, though, too, if it's the right group, and what I mean by the right group, and this is where we have a luxury here in Gatlinburg because we oversee the convention center. So if it's a very large group and it's going to have a great economic impact on the city of Gatlinburg, well, that's something that, we may consider waiving that charge off the convention center because we really want this group to come to Gatlinburg and stay in our hotels and eat in our restaurants and go have fun at our attractions. So that is something that is something that a meeting planner can negotiate, but they just want to make sure that they do it up front and get very clear on some of these hidden costs I was kind of talking about.
Mhm. Wow, gosh. Well, so remember everybody, ask about these hidden costs because you don't want to be surprised or get in an argument with the people at the convention center. So that's a
Exactly, and,
really
and,
good
and we
tip.
don't like that either because that's uncomfortable for everybody. So that's why I said I really press upon my staff. Let's make sure that we have as much details, and that kind of goes back to what I said earlier. As a group, a meeting planner, like I said, we deal with a lot of association meeting planners. Come in and be very upfront about everything about your program, and don't hold anything back because, like I said, I always get the impression sometimes that people will hold things back thinking, well, I'm going to lose my negotiation level if I divulge too much. That's really not the case. The more information we have, because I mean, we want your group here, and we're not trying to like nickel and dime you to get your group here. Like I said, as a CVB, which is most important for us, we're looking at the overall impact for the entire city here in Gatlinburg. So the convention center, if we can find out that information, we're not looking at it as a weapon to use against you as a negotiation. We're looking at it as a tool to go ahead and use to help lower the cost because when all is said and done, we really want your group in Gatlinburg, not necessarily in the convention center. We want your group in Gatlinburg to go ahead and stay in our hotels, eat at our restaurants, and go to our attractions and help the overall economic impact of Gatlinburg.
So, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Dave, because so many people think, well, if I don't say what my budget is, or if I don't say what all my needs are, I'm in a better negotiating position.
Correct.
But we also come across that as consultants that people don't want to say what their budget is or what it is they're willing to do. And it makes it really hard to come up with a good estimate. So I am glad you said that because be upfront about what you're looking for, how much money you have, and what you are willing to negotiate about. And then, like you said, Dave, if you're bringing in a big enough economic impact, people are going to work with you. And I know you will definitely do that, and your staff will definitely do that. I'm hoping other groups would do that as well in other cities. But I did want to ask you, Dave, on a little bit different topic, but thank you. That was all great advice about negotiating and being aware of what might pop up if you don't cover it in the contract. What are some unique things about Gatlinburg that somebody like myself might not know? Because I don't live there and I've never visited. So, what are some unique and fun things about Gatlinburg?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because the one thing I always encourage meeting planners to do, especially if they're putting a group in Gatlinburg or a group anywhere, is ask the CVB what are some unique activities that our attendees can do while they're in Gatlinburg. So for us, we have a huge advantage over a lot of destinations because many people don't know this. We have the largest arts and crafts community in the United States. We have 100 plus artisans that made up this arts and crafts communities. And we also have a program here in Gatlinburg called Hands-on Gatlinburg. So what we've done is we've been able to arrange to where groups of people that are in town will go ahead and go out to an arts and crafts community shop. And then instead of just buying a souvenir, well, we call it hands-on because they can make their own souvenir. So whether they're spinning something or creating something, they're taught how to do it, and now they've just made their own souvenir to go ahead and take back with them when they go home. So that is something unique we have here in Gatlinburg. Another thing that we have is the Arrowmont School of Arts and Crafts. It's the only accredited arts and crafts school in the United States, and Arrowmont is located right here in Gatlinburg as well. And they have a gallery there. They have sessions. They do a lot of things like that. They have tours. Um, and then, like I said, but I mean, it's basically a school, but we have a lot of people that will go ahead and visit Arrowmont kind of in a tourist setting because there is so many cool things at Arrowmont that can be done as well. But it's the only accredited arts and crafts school in the United States.
Wow. I did not know that. I bet a lot of people don't know that about Gatlinburg because when you think of an arts center, you might think of Chicago or you might think of New York. Some people might even think of Los Angeles, but Gatlinburg, wow, a hotbed of art.
Yes,
And that's another
and it is,
great
and
attraction.
like I said, I've had this conversation with many people where they didn't realize that, and when I arrived here in Gatlinburg 8 years ago, I thought that was really one thing, a hidden gem that we had that we really had not been promoting or talking about, and even the arts and crafts community for that matter too, because like I said, we have over 50 attractions in Gatlinburg, and there's plenty of things, fun things to do, but the arts and crafts community is a little bit unique that we have that most destinations don't have. So I always encourage meeting planners when they're in the initial process of talking to a CVB about doing a group or a convention in that city to ask what are some unique things that the attendees can do. And like I touched upon before, with us being right at the base of the Great Smoky National Park, I mean, a group can go up there and do a hike or can go fly fishing. There's all kinds of things like, ride ATVs. There's all kinds of opportunities because we were right at the base of the Great Smoky National Park. But like I said, the arts and crafts community is something that I've really promoted just because that is something that is not really found in a lot of cities, and it is a unique experience that attendees to Gatlinburg, whether they're part of a group or whether they're individually. I mean, we have a lot of tourists that come to Gatlinburg specifically for the arts and crafts community. Right now in the convention center, as we speak, we've got the arts and crafts community is doing a very large trade show down in our exhibit halls where there's close to 300 exhibitors down there right now showing their wares and so forth. And this also is to help them promote the business that they have throughout the community of Gatlinburg.
That sounds fantastic. And I know that everybody likes the arts. Maybe we're not an artist, but we want to enjoy it. So I think that is a great draw for Gatlinburg.
Yeah, and like I said, and we get a lot of good feedback on it. People love it. And the one thing that I've heard personally a lot of times is people love to go ahead and make their own things and take it back home and see, this is what I made. When I was in Gatlinburg, I was shown how to make this, and so I made my own souvenir to take back home. So very popular, very
That's
popular.
lovely. So something you made and it's a little piece of Gatlinburg. So, well, that's been a wonderful conversation about Gatlinburg. It's a city that's been on my list for years to visit. So I really have to get motivated, and get down there, especially check out the arts community there. That's a great moment for me to mention that November here on Radio Free 501c is Thankful for the Arts Month. So stay tuned for those episodes next month. But Dave, I like to ask my guests, what is the one thought you'd like the audience to take away today? And then how can they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about bringing their meeting to Gatlinburg?
The easiest way to probably get a hold of me is just my email address. It's real easy. It's dave@gatlinburg.com. You can also go to our website, which is gatlinburg.com, but the easiest way to get a hold of me is dave@gatlinburg.com. Um, but probably the one takeaway with Gatlinburg is the nice thing about Gatlinburg, it has stayed a very wholesome city. And what I mean by that is it's a city that you can bring your family members to, whether it's a group or whether it's tourism. And it's an extremely safe city. It's a walkable destination. And like I said, it's really kind of a throwback to the old days. Yes, it's there's been a lot of updates, and we've had many hotels that have moved in and have kind of updated the place, but it still has kept that wholesome image. And I think that's why we still have more religious conferences and conventions that come to Gatlinburg more than anything else, because their attendees feel safe while they're in Gatlinburg, and it still holds that wholesome image. So, like I said, you can't go wrong with that. I would always be fearful in being a city that gets a little risque, or might scare away family members, but we're a very family oriented destination, whether you're coming for fun or whether you're coming for a convention. So that's the one takeaway I always put in Gatlinburg. People minds about Gatlinburg, especially if they've never been here before, is that there's a lot of wholesome imagery to Gatlinburg.
Oh, well, that is lovely to know because I think we all like a respite from some of the tension in the world around us, and coming to a place like that is more restful, I think.
It is, and it makes my job simpler, because then I don't have groups coming here and may have seen something out on the street that they may have seen in other destinations, and then they're coming to me saying, okay, I don't know if we can bring our group back here because, we saw this or we heard this. So we're fortunate in that way that I've never had to deal with any issues that I know some other cities have to deal with just because of some of the things that they've got going on in there. Gatlinburg, we've never had to worry about that, so it makes it easier for groups to feel comfortable and continuing to come back to Gatlinburg.
Oh, that is great. Well, that is great to know. And I want to thank you again for joining me this week, Dave.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. Like I said, when I was approached, I was all in. I was looking forward to this, so I really appreciate you having me.
That's great. Well, maybe you'll come back next year. I would love to have you back on the show and hear what else is new about Gatlinburg.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I would love to do that.
Lovely. Okay, great. Well, we have to go rogue for now, though, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So, again, don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite service because you do not want to miss any of these conversations we're having. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. You can find this episode featuring Dave and share it with your colleagues on our podcast page, and check out our library of past episodes. And you can learn what we've been talking about and share those episodes as well if you'd like. If you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, we have a newsletter form. The newsletter will also lead you to our blog page if you want to know what I'm talking about this week, because you never know what I am going to say. If you'd like to learn more about our education offerings, we are offering our ethics course through December. If you need that for your ethics renewal, or if you just want to learn more about ethics, check out the education page. And of course, check out our services page and see if there's something of interest there. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you. Thanks again for joining us this week. And on behalf of Dave and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.